Did you know that the ACT test is about to undergo a very big transformation? Well, it is. For some people, it will be starting in April of 2025. If you're one of those students who likes to take your ACT in the online format, if you are a paper and pencil kind of person, this change is going to happen September of 2025. So basically a year from the recording of this video. And if you are taking the ACT in school, it'll happen spring of 2026. So what are these big changes that I'm talking about here? So the way I see them, there are 8 of them. Let's talk about the first one. If you were going to take the ACT right now, you would have 4 sections that are multiple choice and timed: English, math, reading, and science. And you'd be required to take all 4 of these because your composite score would average your score for the 4 of them. So you have to take the 4 of them, right? And then if you wanted to do the essay, also known as the writing, that would be optional. Well, the big change, number one, is that now this science section, it's no longer required. It is now optional. So starting again, depending on how you're doing the test, could be as early as April of 2025, the new format of the ACT will only require what we call the core 3 sections: English, math, and reading. So you would be required to do those 3, but the science, you would only need to do it if in fact you wanted to do it and you specifically sign up for it. So that is big ACT change number 1, which is that the science section is soon to be optional. So the second thing, which I think I may have given away, is that your composite score, again, instead of being all 4 of the current sections, English, math, reading, and science, and those get averaged to become your composite score, science is not included in your composite score anymore for the new version of the test. So again, it would only be the core 3, English, math, and reading, and then those 3 scores, 1 through 36, would then be averaged to be your composite score. So that is change number 2, is that the composite score will not include the science as part of its calculation. So hi there, my name is Kristina of Ivy Lounge Test Prep. I help high schoolers all over the globe get into the colleges of their dreams by helping them dramatically raise their SAT and ACT test scores. And now I have a question for you. Do you happen to be an SAT person or an ACT person? Do you think you're going to be taking the ACT? Write it down in the comment below. I would love to find out. So the third major change with the new ACT format is that there are going to be 44 fewer questions total. That's awesome, right? Like fewer questions to do for your test day, but let's talk about how they are allocated. So currently, if we're talking just the core 3 sections that are gonna matter in the new format of the test, the English, the math, and the reading, we'd have 75 questions for English, 60 questions for math, and then we had to have 40 questions for reading. The new test would have it to where those 3 sections would have 50 questions for English, 45 for the math, and then 36 for the reading. So that would be 131 questions total. So again, going from 175 to 131, you're saving yourself 44 questions if you're just sticking to the core 3 sections of the new ACT and not doing, the optional science. The fourth big change with the new format of the ACT is that your total testing time is going to be reduced. So not just because you could be one of those people who decides, science not for me. For me, it's optional. I'm not going to do it. I'm only doing these 3 sections. But the actual time for each of the remaining, English, math, reading, the time for those are also reduced. So the way it works is if you just opt to take the new format of the ACT, the core 3, the 3 sections that comprise your new composite, you would be taking a 2-hour test, like literally 120 minutes if you're a regular time test taker. If in fact you wanted to add on the optional science section, it would be 2 hours, 40 minutes. If you decided, I don't want science, but I want to do the writing or the essay, it would also be 2 hours, 40 minutes. And if you decided you wanted to do both of the optional sections and do the main test plus the science plus the essay, then that would be 3 hours, 20 minutes for a regular time test taker. So the fifth change of the new format of the ECT is that, well, if you think about it, if you have fewer questions, you also have fewer time, but the way they did it in such a way that you do have more time per question to answer your questions. So they did not reduce them perfectly in proportion between like reducing the time and reducing the number of questions. So here's what the breakdown is. So if you were to do the ACT right now and you're doing, the 4 sections, it would be 175 minutes. It's almost 3 hours. You'd have 215 questions because we're including science. That's roughly like 48.8 seconds per question. But the way the new one's got to be, if you do just what's required, the 3 core English, math, reading sections, right? That would be exactly 120 minutes or 2 hours. And then that would be 131 questions. And that would round to 55 seconds per question. So going from a little under 49 to 55. So that's a little over 6 seconds per question. The sixth change in the new ACT is that in addition to the sections themselves being shorter time-wise and having fewer questions, if you think about it, this is going to affect the sections that have passages the most, right? So English and reading sections. So the English section, currently it's 5 passages each with 15 questions apiece, right? The reading section is currently 4 passages each with 10 questions apiece. So we don't know the exact way they're going to break it down, but we do know that the actual passages themselves will be shorter and likely include fewer questions per passage. So that is the sixth change, is that the English and the reading passages themselves will be shorter. The seventh way that the ACT is going to change is that, when you currently take it, like half the time you end up being given a fifth section and you're like, my tutor didn't tell me about this. What are these questions that I have to spend 20 minutes doing? Well, that was because the ACT would want to test out test questions to, check for difficulty level before they then incorporated those test questions on future tests, right? But the problem with that, I mean, you can guess the problem with that. Students are already tired after they finish their test. They don't want to do extra. So they're probably, like, at least a lot of students I know, I would tell my students, hey, don't phone it in because it's going to help the ACT make accurate grading rubrics for future tests. But still, you can't help it. You're tired after 3 hours. You're gonna phone it in. So many students would be phoning it in for those, fifth passages of experimental questions. And therefore, the ACT isn't really getting accurate data on if those questions are really hard, easy, or medium, right? So instead, what they're doing, which I think is pretty genius, they are rolling experimental questions inside the actual sections of the test. So in other words, the English section, for instance, that soon will only have 50 questions. Well, not all of those are going to count. I don't know exactly how many would count and how many would be experimental, but we know that some of them would be experimental, but you as a test taker will not know which ones. So that means you have to do all of them as if your life depended on it because you don't know which ones are going to count and which ones aren't towards your test. So I think that is also genius, because also you're not spending an extra 20 minutes. Like within those 2 hours of just like the regular 3 core section ACT, within those 2 hours, you're not only answering all the questions you need to get your score, but you're also answering the experimental questions so that the ACT can, make accurate tests and grading rubrics for future tests, right? So that is the seventh change with the new test. And I know what you're saying, Kristina, I get it. There's like, fewer questions, fewer time, but can you like lay out the format for me? Well, as a matter of fact, I can because just recently the ACT actually posted it on their website, and I'll include a link to the ACT's informational page about the ACT updates in the link below. But just so you know, the English test, right, which is grammar, it's going to be 35 minutes and you're going to have 50 questions. This is 10 minutes less, but 25 fewer questions. For math, it's going to be 45 minutes to answer 45 questions. Again, this is better than the 60 questions in 60 minutes of the current test. Reading is going to be more time, actually. It's going to be 40 minutes instead of the current 35, but you're answering fewer questions, 36 questions instead of 40. And then as far as the optional sections go, science, you're also going to get actually more time. You're going to get 40 minutes instead of 35 to answer 40 questions. So that one you actually would be gaining 5 minutes. However, that means more time per question. And then the writing or the essay is 40 minutes to complete the essay. So that is the new format of the ACT that, depending on how you're going to take it, you're either, if you're doing it online, it's going to start April of 2025. If you're doing it paper and pencil, it'll be September 2025. And if you're doing it for like an ACT school day, it'll happen spring of 2026. And so the next question you're probably asking yourself is, okay, those are all the changes. It's like anything staying the same. Yes, there are things that are going to stay the same with the test, and that's what you're going to watch in this next video.